Hi, everyone. It's Lisa here, and I'm joined today by Elizabeth Denevi, who is the wonderful curator and leader of our Equities Excellence Conference. We're actually in the middle of the conference. It's day 2. We've just heard from Dr. Howard Stevenson on racial literacy. We have over 100 educators gathered, and I'm just so pleased that, Elizabeth, you can take some time to talk with me this morning. We're reaching out to all of the CATDC community and those who couldn't be here with us at the conference today. Before we jump in, I just want to let everyone know a little bit more about Elizabeth. She co-founded the organization Teaching While White. She is the director of East Ed, which is an organization that works with schools nationally to increase equity, promote diversity pedagogy, and really implement strategies to help educators grow, which is why I'm here and why CATDC is here. And Elizabeth has been doing work with us at CATDC for 5 years now. Elizabeth, is that right? Leading Teaching While White, and also are developing culturally responsive pedagogy workshop, among some others. And then she co-facilitates with Rashida Carroll, our ongoing group for DEI practitioners. So Elizabeth, thank you for taking some time. I know you've been really busy. And I have a few questions for you. First of all, you've been doing this work for over 20 years and leading Equity as Excellence. This is now your 5th year. What is unique about the Equity as Excellence Conference in your mind?
Thank you, Lisa. What I think is unique about the project that we're trying to do, one is that we are together for 4 days. And so I think that notion of extended learning over time is valuable. I think it's an immersive experience, and it allows us to think about equity in the big picture, but then we take a deep dive on issues of gender and race. We don't cover all aspects of diversity, so I think that's also something that's unique. We've decided to really focus in on notions of race and gender. Not to say that other aspects of identity aren't important, but that's a particular focus that we have. And I think being able to hold those things together and look at the intersections between race and gender is a really powerful way of thinking about our own, increasing our skills around equity literacy. The other thing I think is very unique is that we use a lot of scholarship for this conference. And one thing I noticed when I served as a diversity director for 10 years, one thing was oftentimes I found diversity directors were thrust into positions because they were excellent teachers and they really cared about kids and they tend to be really good relationship builders, but they didn't always have sort of the skills and expertise they needed from the research to be implementing practices that could be research-based, that could be helpful. And so I often hear from diversity directors and other teachers, gosh, I'd love to incorporate more research. I'd love to know more. Where's the time? So we've decided to take what's best that we know from educational research, and we don't do flash in the pan things. We're doing things that we've been able to watch over time that we know are connected to issues of achievement in schools and are connected to our instruction and our support for teachers if in your leadership position. And so that notion of the scholarship, so that we're developing both the knowledge that is out there around what makes our schools more equitable, because I always say, it's not that we don't know what to do, we do know what to do. Do we have the will and do we have the space to learn these tried and true techniques that we can bring back to our schools? So oftentimes we have a large pre-reader, so there's a lot of homework that we ask folks to do, but we think it pays off. I think it makes us very unique.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I'm really appreciating how the scholars that you've gathered are also practitioners. So they're bringing all this great learning over the work that's been done over the last couple decades, but then they are also in the field really putting it into practice. So that I also feel is really unique about the conference and why I love being part of it. So obviously we're in a very extraordinary time, very challenging time. So why is Equity as Excellence particularly important and valuable right now?
One thing we opened the conference, and it was a piece that we wrote for East Ed about sort of how we can think about COVID-19 and thinking about being in the midst of a global pandemic at the same time that this country is really having a serious reckoning around the racial injustice that's been around for hundreds of years. And so I think this notion of what makes a healthy, safe school community is something we've been able to have a laser focus on for our time together. And I think this notion of healthy expanding beyond what we might just think about protocols about preventing a pandemic, which of course we want to do. But when a school is faced with either stories or memories coming back from alumni, or the experiences of current students, adults who may be experiencing racial stress, racial stereotypes and prejudice, and then may have created a system of racism that's operating in the school, that can create an unhealthy community then when folks are unavailable for learning, just as it can if folks are trying to fight a horrible disease. So just want to make sure that we're really expanding our notions of what health means, what it means to be healthy, and that we're keeping that clear. I'm watching schools either want to deal with sort of like, they're dealing with COVID-19 and they're like, well, I can't do anything else. And what I want to say is, let's expand our notion of what it means to keep all children and all adults safe in our community. And that way I feel like we can keep our equity work front and center as we think about having everybody have a healthy and safe return to school in the fall.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that seems critical, that combination. So, and then, you know, here we are in this online conference, this virtual conference. How do you think things are translating? This is our first time doing it this way. How's it going?
I'm of mixed minds of it. Part of me is really excited because I had to really manage expectations around it, because when you take something, it's like teachers with their classrooms, right? I'd rather have the kids around me than having them in little squares on my screen. So I think it is different, and being able to say it's a different kind of experience. And so moving to a virtual experience, we had to streamline, we had to be focused, we had to have greater clarity. And I think this notion of less is more has never been more true than when you move into a virtual environment. That does mean we can't cover the breadth of topics that I think we normally would, because we just don't have as much time together. So I think there's that reality to it. The good side, or maybe an upside that I'm seeing in the online work, and we're seeing this with the workshops we're doing with Teaching While White, and also the work we're doing around assessing for equity, where we look at grading practices and things like that. Having folks sort of online in their homes or their outdoor spaces or wherever they're creating, folks are sort of enjoying having a reflective space where they can just sort of sit and think and be reflective. Some folks who being in a room with folks may be more stressful, and I have to sort of show up in a particular way. I can sort of just be in my own reactions. If things feel hard, I can shut off my video and I can take a moment, whatever I need to do. So, and I've been talking about this with other equity practitioners who've moved online. So I think there's a real value that folks can kind of dig in a personal way in the virtual world that may not happen when you're in a room with 100 folks. So I'm calling that an upside, even though I don't still like it. I'm glad we're doing it. I think it was important that it happened, but I'd rather be in the room with everybody, honestly.
Right. Yeah, me too. I miss that a lot. And I know that our teachers are missing that, and that when they come back to school in the fall, they'll be missing seeing their students face to face. But I think you've offered some important, guidelines or pieces of wisdom there around less is more. And there's this opportunity for more reflection and maybe some more personalized learning. So kind of segueing into the learning of the conference, what would you say are kind of the three most important, takeaways? I know people really need to be here to get it fully, but if you were to kind of capture three really important pieces, what do you think that would be?
So I think what we've learned over the 5 years, and I'm really grateful to the participants who offer amazing feedback. So it helps us, right? Because we know how important feedback is. It's the only way we can say we want to do all these things, but it really depends what folks have been through the conference, come back and say that they learned. I think what I hear most often is really a deeper understanding of what it really means to create an equitable space. And what does it mean to put our most vulnerable students, families at the center, for whom our schools were not designed originally. And even as we had advanced and changed, many of our schools have folks who are extremely underrepresented, either by number or by power. And that notion of representation really matters and connects to learning. So I think that notion of what does it really mean to center the most vulnerable in your community, I think folks walk away saying that. I think the second thing I hear is that folks really were sort of keeping the notion of their diversity efforts or their equity efforts as sort of a moral argument. It was something that they should be doing, but it had been very disconnected from their practice, their everyday practice around teaching and learning. And so I think they've been able to see, oh my gosh, I never thought about how my unexamined bias may be getting in the way of me having healthy relationships with all my students. I didn't know that my feedback to certain students will vary based on my racial background and the racial background of my students. I never thought about when I don't interrupt or I don't lean in or I don't speak up and don't say something, that my silence, right, could mean that I'm okay with what's just happened, right? Or that I'm complicit in what's going on. And so if something happens in my classroom now, I have to say something. If something happens in a faculty meeting, I can't just let it go by. So I think that notion of being able to connect our anti-bias work directly to our excellent teaching and learning, folks say, oh, now I don't separate those two things. Great teaching, in the words of Gloria Ladson-Billings, anti-bias teaching, it's just good teaching, and it should be the lens through which we move. I think the third thing is the idea of having a group of folks that you've been able to partner with and collaborate with over a series of days. None of us can make our schools more equitable alone. It doesn't work that way. So I think the power of relationship building, of knowing you're not alone, and suddenly having a whole cohort of colleagues. We have 100 folks all online swimming in the same direction. It's incredibly powerful. So I think that group experience, that you're not alone and that you have a network and other folks you can reach out to after the conference, which many of our participants have said they've stayed in contact with their cohort groups, seems to me another really powerful learning moment.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And thanks for creating this learning moment for us this year when it is so needed. And I really, this idea of relationship building and community, that's really at the core of CATDC. And you've been such an important role model and leader to me personally, and then to the larger community. So everybody pay attention to what Elizabeth is leading coming up in the next year, and you can experience more directly all that she has to offer, and keep doing the good work in your schools. Thanks for joining us today, and do take care. Thanks, Elizabeth. Bye, everyone.